Okay. I'm glad to see that so many people have heard of the Genealogical Proof Standard because that's really what I'm going to be discussing here today. The Genealogical Proof Standard, in my opinion, is kind of like the foundation of a house. It's the foundation of our research. If you don't have a good foundation, of course, you end up building a shack that looks like it might blow over with a good strong wind. But the Genealogical Proof Standard requires our research to be thorough and accurate, and that helps us to build a much stronger foundation. The first condition of the Genealogical Proof Standard is the one that I am going to be focusing on more, and the first condition is that we conduct a reasonably exhaustive search for all relevant records. And there are several reasons that this is so important. As we're collecting records, we have to understand that any individual record by itself can contain inaccurate information. I'll give it just a second for this slide to switch. We obviously want our research to be as accurate as possible. One of my favorite terms that I've heard in genealogy is what's known as former ancestors. And these are all those people who we once believed to be our ancestors, only to have our beliefs proven by further evidence. And then, the main point is that by conducting a reasonably exhaustive search, we collect all available evidence for each fact in order to ensure the overall accuracy of our research. So that will cut down on the possibility of us having an entire family tree filled with former ancestors. That was, a basic overview, but I want to go into a little bit more specifically. Why is a reasonably exhaustive search so necessary? One of the things that many of us do when we're just getting started and still learning the process is that we will kind of hone in on a single record. And if that record tells us the answer to our question, we accept it as the gospel truth and we move on to the next question we have. Looking at this death certificate, for example, it provides the age, it provides the date of birth. So we would jot that down on our pedigree chart or put it into our legacy family tree software and move on to the next question we have, our next ancestor. We see the names of the name and the maiden name of the mother appear, so we just take that and move along. However, once you start locating more and more records about our ancestors, about various aspects of their lives, we begin to notice that there are inconsistencies in the information from one record to the next. One record, for example, census records are extremely infamous for providing inconsistent information. One census record may say he's 40 and then 10 years later he's 60. That's actually a true story. I researched a family a few years ago where the patriarch of the family went from 40 to 60 to 80 across 3 census records. So he was a farmer, so maybe he was really working hard because he seemed to age about 10 years, about 20 years for every 10. In order to overcome these problems and learn, what these inconsistencies are, the first thing we have to do is find multiple independent sources for every fact that we have. And the key word here really is independent. If you find a death certificate, an obituary, and a gravestone, you may have 3 records, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those are independent sources. The same son may have, ordered the tombstone, put the, death notice into the newspaper and filled out the death certificate. So if that one son has the wrong information or, doesn't know what the accurate information is, then he is providing inaccurate information 3 times. So, in this example you can see here on the screen, in the left corner, top left corner, you see the 3rd line down, Gabriel Diggs. He was born allegedly April 1876. And this is from the 1900 federal census. The document directly to the right of that is from his death certificate, and it provides his date of birth as September 1877. Quite a bit of difference between those 2 records. At the bottom there you see his first marriage. This was in 1894 and he was 21 years old. Well, these 3 sources all provide different information. Obviously, if he was 21 in 1894, that's a date of birth around 1873. So was Gabriel born in 1873, 1876, or 1877? If we had taken just one of these records and based our information on a single one of them rather than collecting all of them, we wouldn't have seen that inconsistency, and we may accept as truthful a record that ultimately was not. Excuse me. One myth that I remember when I was first getting started researching is that they used to say, well, you have to have 3 records. If you have 3 records that say the same thing, then that is proof. Then you can take it to the bank. Well, 3 is not the magic number. As I mentioned before, you could have 3 records all created by the same individual who, quite honestly, didn't know what he was talking about. If that happens, then you have 3 incorrect records. It's very important that we go and search and extensively so that we can get every record that could possibly be relevant. By collecting all of these relevant records, we can then turn around and correlate all of the evidence contained in these records. And that's another aspect of the genealogical proof standard, is that we correlate the evidence from each of these records in order to try to determine what is actually the truth. So the next question, and this is one that I hear quite frequently, is how do I conduct a reasonably exhaustive search? It's great to say you have to go find the records. Well, how do you find them? Most importantly, the most important thing that you have to know is what records are available, what records were created, what records exist, where they exist, and how to go about getting them. If you don't know what records are available, there's no way that you'll possibly find them all. So that involves research, and not just researching your ancestors. You have to research the location in which your ancestors lived. If you're doing work and your ancestors lived in a city, for example, cities often have neighborhoods that are ethnically based. And if you have someone who lives in that neighborhood, perhaps he shares a similar origin as someone else. But you have to be able to look at the whole neighborhood in order to see that. Migration patterns in general. If everyone from, if you have a large group of people who move, for example, from southern Maryland to Kentucky, well, if you're researching someone in Kentucky that may have been born in Maryland, you can follow that migration path and understand about that mass migration and see and have a good idea of where they may have come from. You have to know about churches and things of that nature. Sometimes, a Catholic family, there may be multiple Catholic churches in the city. The church closest to them may have been Polish Catholic, but they were Irish, so they didn't go to the Polish church that was 2 blocks away. They went to the Irish Catholic church that was on the other side of town. You have to understand different aspects of the location in which your ancestors lived. Another very important aspect of location is understanding the laws that existed. If you're not real sure about the laws, then you can't really be sure about the records, because, of course, most records, at least government records, are created by the passage of laws. They're not created because some court clerk decided it would be fun to do that day. They were created because they were told they had to, usually by the legislature. The example you're looking at here on the screen is one of my favorites. In the when the state of Maryland was first settled in the early 17th century, it was actually the first state that had religious freedom. And the reason is that it was a kind of a Catholic haven, a Roman Catholic haven, to sit and kind of capitalize on the same economy that was being created by the Anglican, what's called Protestant Episcopal here in the United States, Virginia, colony of Virginia, that was, right there on the Chesapeake Bay as well. Towards the end of the 17th century, however, there was a revolution in England. The Catholic king was overthrown, and they established the Protestant Episcopal Church, the Church of England, throughout all of their colonies, including Maryland. And laws were created to establish the Church of England over the Maryland colony, were passed by the Maryland legislature. Part of this law stated that the parish register shall make an entry of all vestry proceedings and of all births, marriages, and burials. It doesn't specify all Protestant Episcopal births, marriage, and burials. It says all births, marriages, and burials. There were, of course, still a lot of Catholics who lived in Maryland. Those who had settled and been, coming in over the previous, 60 years, they didn't all decide to leave. They had, some of them had built up quite a bit of wealth here in Maryland. And what you end up finding is that Quakers, Catholics, other religious denominations, you find their births, marriages, and burials recorded in Protestant Episcopal parish registers. So if you know that your ancestor was not Protestant Episcopal, you might skip over looking in those registers unless you knew that the law stated that they had to record all births, marriages, and burials. Once you know that law and understand that that was the law during the almost the entire colonial period after the Glorious Revolution in England, so you're looking at about a 100-year period where you find people who did not belong to a church. You find their vital events recorded in that church's registers. Again, this is just, to me, a perfect example of why you have to understand the laws that were in effect when your ancestors were alive. In today's age, 2012, the first place we usually go to do research is online. I'm a huge fan of Google. I don't know if I have to pay them royalties for saying that, or maybe they should pay me royalties for saying that, but I do a lot of online research, as you could tell by the title of my book, Online State Resources for Genealogy. And, part of that is, obviously all of that is online, but part of doing online research is understanding that there are limits to online research. Every day those limits are growing less and less prominent, but those limits do still exist. And until you understand the limits of online research, you might end up building yourself a nice brick wall inadvertently. Of course, we're all familiar, I'm sure, with Ancestry and other similar subscription sites. They do have many record images online. I'm sorry, there's just a little bit of a delay here. You do find quite a few record images online on subscription sites. Ancestry